Chapter 44. The fiasco seemed to unwind at the speed of a twister plowing across an open field. My expectations disintegrated as the hulking rhino lowered its head, then charged my way without provocation. An arrow sailed from my right. It lodged into the beast's shoulder with no discerning effect. My temples throbbed under the threat, but I held my ground until the last possible moment before diving away. The rhino lumbered by as the high grass raked the front of my robe.
"You need to learn how to roll,"
Elrin shouted. He raised one glowing hand. Elrin casts Minor Heal. Brunk is healed for 16 HP. Brunk receives healing over time effect. Plus 8 HP. Plus 6 HP. Plus 8 HP. 67% HP remaining. The report sent a wave of hot fear through my torso. If Rashawn had been around, Brunk's health would have been fully replenished, but it hadn't dawned on me just how weak Elrin's spells would be. I intuited that, as a much lower level who hadn't practiced enough to raise his light magic skill, he suffered penalties. I whipped my head around, expecting to see the beast turning my direction, but Elrin's loud suggestion that I learn how to fall more efficiently had drawn its focus. It stomped one foot alongside its massive head, then dragged it backward. A casting bar appeared overhead, then it repeated the gesture. Trayla rose and shouted from the high grass. "Tess, engage! Where's your pet?" She shoved a finger toward Elrin. "Protect the healer!" "Manti!" I spun in a circle, searching the sky, then spotted a tiny glowing orange mote zipping in our direction. Within seconds, she zoomed past me. "I'm here, Tess." Just before the rhino's casting bar filled, she spat a torrent of fire along its back. Monteleana casts Flame Trench. Tundra rhino resists. -0 HP. "Move!" I waved both my arms to my right. "Get out of there!" The rhino's casting meter filled, then it shot across the open space between it and our healer. Elrin dove and tried to roll into a ball, but the attack clipped his legs and spun him sideways so he careened through the air. One sandal popped free of his foot and flew away. Tundra rhino clips Elrin Zen. -26 HP. 208 HP remaining. The rhino's heavy feet dragged trenches in the ground as it skidded to a halt, and a hollow sensation punched my chest with the realization he'd have killed Elrin in a single blow if it had landed flush. Elrin sat up, shook his head to clear the cobwebs, then snapped around as if he suddenly remembered the threat. This time, the rhino didn't stop to prepare a long-ranged attack. It charged forward, bearing down on its target. Elrin kicked off his remaining sandal as he jumped to his feet. He spun his staff in a blur, then whipped it from one side of his body to the other as it spun. But anyone watching the 1,000-pound beast rumbling toward him would have seen that any attack would have proved futile. A white flash surrounded Elrin. Trayla casts Flash Heal. Elrin Zen is healed for 26 HP. 100% HP. Monteleana zipped through the air and shot off another flurry of flames that streaked across the rhino's face and over its massive forehead. Monteleana casts Flame. Tundra rhino resists. -0 HP. Like the arrow Trayla fired moments ago, the fire wasn't having any effect. My every muscle trembled with trepidation as I twirled my hands. Fiery tendrils burst from the ground, then wrapped themselves around the rhino's legs. The beast skidded to a halt. You cast Flame Bindings. Tundra rhino is encumbered. Tundra rhino resists. -0 HP. Tundra rhino is encumbered. Okay, so even though he's resisting the fire damage, at least the bindings worked. I cast an eye skyward as Monteleana turned in a wide arc to pass for another attack. The rhino's thick skin resisted fire, rendering my summon useless, and I didn't want to see her hurt. "Sorry, Manti." I dismissed her, focused on another spell, then raised my hand into the air. When I focused on the spell I wanted, an image of a blonde caster appeared. She waved her hands in a circular motion, with one following the other in a pattern over her head before swinging them down by her sides. I mimicked the gesture as I focused on the spell name. A chill coursed from my shoulders across my biceps, down my forearms, then burst through my fingertips when I brought my arms down. White light bloomed with the sensation of cold as it zipped across my flesh. An ice-blue line split the air above me, then spread into a portal. A bright figure of the same color, about twice the size of Monteleana, burst into the open. You cast Summon Lesser Ice Spirit. Killian has been born into Enora. The rhino burst free of its encumbrances, then burst toward Elrin. My new ice spirit zipped in front of me, then hovered at eye level. Although high-pitched, The timbre of his voice was deeper than Monteleana's.
Command me, Tess, or I can choose my own attacks if you desire.
Trying to keep up with his skills would serve only to slow my own contributions to the battle. Choose your own. Go! The rhino bore down as Elrin's staff spun in tight circles, creating figure eights as it crossed his body. When his enemy came within 20 feet, he thrust one shoulder back, then extended his arm. The staff spun as it zoomed through the air, then clanked off the rhino's head. My interface reported there'd been no damage. The beast continued its charge. Killian zoomed in, spread his lips to reveal rows of sharp white teeth, then expelled a blizzard of crystalline blades that punctured the soil across the rhino's path. Killian casts Icy Barrage. The crystals planted in the ground. Although I wondered for a fleeting moment what good they'd do, I received my answer as the rhino closed the last of the distance and his huge round feet stepped on the shards. The beast's knees buckled. It thumped to the ground, then it slid the last few feet where its face lay inches from Elrin's. The look of horror on our healer's face might have been comical if not for the tense situation. Still, I took a capture. It wasn't like it required effort. The rhino raised one foot. Streams of blood crossed its thick skin. It drew its head back toward its shoulders and prepared to strike. But Brunk burst into view, leaped high into the air, then brought his spear down on the animal's back with a vicious thrust, complemented by his descending weight. Half the shaft buried into the rhino's rump as Elrin scurried away toward me. Brunk uses Leaping Strike. Critical hit. Tundra Rhino, minus 56 HP, plus 25 critical damage. Having a level 14 brute on my side was a boon, and I whispered a few quick words of thanks to the goddess. Trayla zoomed past me with her bow bouncing on her back and a staff clutched in both hands. When Elrin came into range, she stopped. "I'll heal. Your light magic rank skill is still too low. If you cast lesser heals to elevate it, you'll be more effective." Although I expected him to flash an evil glare, he surprised me with a quick nod.
Will do.
He rushed over to me, then turned and peered down at his feet as he stepped off to my right. Why is he counting off paces? The answer came quickly as the unspoken question, measuring his casting range. Once he seemed to be satisfied with the separation between us, he raised his hand and cast a healing spell on himself. He'd even exhibited the mindfulness to recover his weapon while Brunk distracted the rhino. The rock troll straddled the rhino, his legs clutching the beast's thick neck. He raised his bloody spear, then brought it down on the beast's head. Although it didn't penetrate as deep as when his weight complemented the thrust, a new wound opened in the rhino when Brunk pulled it away. My interface filled with text with all the ensuing actions of my party, and I blinked with frustration. With the thought, the text window slid out of view, and I focused on my spells tab. One caught my eye. Drain life. Drain 30 HP per second from enemies with less than 50% health remaining. Type, channeled spell. Cost, 10 mana per second. Damage, 20 HP per second. Cooldown, 1 minute. The text faded, then became transparent as I focused through it at the rhino. Tundra Rhino, 47 HP remaining. The caster woman appeared in my interface, then demonstrated, reaching out with both hands, then forming claws as crimson energy flowed from her fingertips. I repeated the gesture, but I received a message that I was a couple yards out of range, so I sped forward and tried again. You cast Drain Life. Tundra Rhino, minus 14 HP, 6 HP resisted. Minus 14 HP, 6 HP resisted. Elemental resistance is one thing, but what's this? According to the spell description, I should have done 20 hit points of damage per second. Then it occurred to me that the rhino was several levels higher. I suspected that gap accounted for the difference. I was yanked out of my thoughts by an alarming message. Enmity with Tundra Rhino has reached 17%. I blurted the word. Enmity? Elrin answered.
Hate. Focus on the word in your interface.
Gah, this I should know by now. I focused. Enmity. Enmity is divided among party members according to who has most frustrated an opponent. When your enmity reaches a higher percentage than those of your comrades in arms, your enemy will attack you. Elrin took a step in my direction.
How do you channel a spell like that when you're focused on your interface?
I returned my gaze to the reddish energy flooding from the rhino and into my fingertips. I don't know. I just feel it and maintain that sensation. It's separate from what my brain is doing. Does that make any sense? Enmity with tundra rhino has reached 27%.
None whatsoever. You're truly a natural, Contessa of Millbury.
The rhino flexed its haunches, then shot up onto its hind legs. Brunk slid down its back, his thick hands clawing for purchase to no avail. He thumped to the ground. Then the rhino sat on him, eliciting a howl of pain. The sound pierced my ears, and my heart thumped in a violent show of empathy. Trela called out, "Prop up the troll with some of your hot spells, and I'll hit him with the flash heals until the rhino moves. Stack it up."
Got it.
Elrin thrusted out a clawed hand. It flashed white. My mana bar flashed in warning that I was running low, and when I focused on it, a lump formed in my throat. I was out of mana. I stopped casting, then the rhino stood up and turned toward me. Enmity with tundra rhino has reached 41%. Warning, attack imminent. Elrin waved his free hand furiously.
Tess, run!
The scene slowed for a moment as the rhino scraped its thick foot on the ground, then launched in my direction. Such speed from a huge beast was a sight to behold, and it dawned on me I'd never outrun it. After all, we were in flatlands. There were no trees to climb or holes to dive into. Killian laid down another trail of ice in the rhino's path, but when its feet fell onto the shards, it continued its charge without faltering. My mana bar blinked. Brunk rolled around, grunting in pain. Trela waved furiously, joining in the calls for me to run. A voice rang out in my head.
Call on your fire, girl.
I threw my arms up into a V, then closed my eyes. Elrin protested.
Tess, your mana is empty. What are you doing?
I pictured the scene outside the dormitory when I'd almost attacked Roshan, tried to home in on the fiery sensation that rushed through my body from my feet up. When I recalled how the ground seemed to heat and swell beneath my feet, that same sensation bloomed again. The heat rushed up my legs, channeling through me faster than before. I dropped my clawed hands, stretched them out, opened my eyes, then jerked at the sight of the impending doom rushing toward me. Thundering hooves kicked up dirt. I squinted, ground my teeth. The hot energy brought droplets of sweat to my forehead. The rhino's color changed from stone gray to a glowing red as the crimson energy siphoned from the lava lines erupted from my palms. I turned the rays inward and they channeled into one thicker ray of heat. Warning: when channeling the power of the source while your mana is depleted, your health is used to fuel your attacks. Channeling cost, 10 HP per second. Note, you do not recover mana while channeling from your health pool. The impact sliced through the center of the already depleted rhino's face, splitting a grotesque chasm between its nostrils and eyes, then peeling away the flesh. Energy engulfed its head as it slammed to the ground. Its eyes popped, sending red and white rivers down its snout. Then the ray thickened on that end and surged back toward me in a sudden burst of magic power. The world blinked out of existence. Chapter 45. It was like the goddess had snapped her fingers. My heart pounded a single time in my chest, then my eyes shot open. Although I stood in the same spot, and Brunk, Elrin, and Trela were there, the sudden blackness had left me expecting everything would have changed. I couldn't make sense of it. You have reached 0 HP. Ring of Resurrection activated. Ring of Resurrection will not charge again for 24 hours. I splayed my fingers at eye level and stared at the ring. Elrin gave my back a gentle clap, but the way I jerked, one might have thought he stabbed me. He didn't seem to notice.
Good job, Tess. Although I'd seen the results of what you could do in the exercise field, I still couldn't believe it when I saw it with my own eyes. Was that the same spell?
His tone became concerned when my blank stare lingered a few moments more.
Tess? Are you okay?
Did I miss something? Trela stepped closer. What's going on? Brunk joined, his greenish skin splattered with red droplets.
That's okay.
The world finally came back into focus, and the realization of the message in my interface hit home. Damn it! So as to keep any questions at bay, I shoved the hand of splayed fingers out and swung it in a wide arc so each can see. A gift from Roshan. What I just did would have killed me if it hadn't been for the ring.
That's some gift,
Elrin said.
I wonder if she has any more.
Trela shook her head in frustration. But that also means if we encounter another precarious conflict, you will have no safe ground to fall on. Elrin shrugged his shoulders high and turned his palms toward the sky.
And we'll just have to be careful. Cheer up, Tess. We just defeated a much higher level enemy who probably should have crushed us underfoot. I mean, we all leveled. Isn't that worth celebrating instead of wallowing in our gloom?
One of my shoulders twitched. Brunk is higher level. Don't underestimate his contribution. I noted the flashing icon in my interface and focused there. A translucent pane filled the center of my field of view. Congratulations, you have reached level 10. You will now receive 4 elective attribute points per level. You have 4 attribute points to spend. You may now choose one lesser summoned spirit to be upgraded to standard rank via a special quest. Monteleana has learned Flame Beacon. The lesser fire spirit radiates with energy, casting 30 meters in all direction. Type, spell, damage, NA. Cooldown, NA. Fire sight. The lesser fire spirit concentrates its inner heat to blast beams from its eyes. Type, spell, cost, 50 mana. Damage, 35 to 50. Cooldown, 5 seconds. Your ice summon must increase combat experience to receive skill upgrades. I can't believe your luck, Trayla blurted. Powers I've only heard of in lore, and a ring of resurrection to boot? She strode away from me in the direction of the corpse whose head I'd almost sliced completely in half. Although the sight of the dead monster was grisly, I did have to revel, just a little. Brunk tilted his head, raised his bushy eyebrows, as he was wont to do, then gently tapped the side of his fist against his chest 4 times. Just to be sure of your meaning, I asked, does that mean you're wondering if I'm okay? He nodded, then turned and followed Trayla toward the rhino. I watched his bulging back muscles as he walked away and reached into his belt to produce the knife with which I'd seen him carving a spear earlier. I guess he decided I was fine. Elrin stepped closer.
Alone at last.
I shot him a look, and even though I read the jest in his eyes, I stomped after the other 2. He followed behind me.
Hey, I was just kidding. Joking around. You're not going to zap me or something, are you?
He still wore that boyish smile, so I ignored him. By the time I arrived at the rhino, Brunk's knife was buried to the hilt as he sliced along its gut. I watched with rapt interest as he worked the knife in a nice, clean line, its blade growing shallower then deeper as he plunged. When he reached the tough skin before its neck, he slipped out the blade, then started a crosscut. A few minutes later, Brunk had worked his way across its body. He cut circles 3/4 of the way around and across the backside to create a kind of square. Then he carved around the very tops of the legs. After that, he wiped the blood on his shorts, then shoved his knife back into the sheath. Brunk dug his fingers into the rear corner of the belly cut. With a grunt, he ripped it away from the flesh beneath. Then he worked his way forward, digging his fingers in where the skin still bound to the meat and repeating the gesture. When the skin reached the legs, he retrieved his knife, cut a neat line right up the middle, then edged it around the circles he'd cut earlier. 3/4 of that animal's skin came away in one huge piece. Brunk rolled it up as one might a bed fur or a rug. Then he offered it to me. I shuffled back a step. What? I don't even know if I can lift that. Why are you giving it to me? Since his hands were full, he cocked his chin and turned his eyes toward my hip. I glanced down to find Luli's bag, where it rested at the end of the long strap I'd thrown over the opposite shoulder.
Magic.
The bag? I nodded. Yes, it's magic. Then his meaning dawned. Wait, you have to be kidding me. There's no way that gigantic roll of rhino skin is going to fit in this. I slapped the bag for emphasis. Trayla disagreed. Of course it will. That's why they call it a magic bag. She shook her head in something approaching derision. But the expression on her face was just a little bit less harsh, so I chose not to be offended. But I also wasn't an idiot. I unfastened and pulled back the flap to show her the black void. It lacks the circumference to fit the rug. Trayla set her hands on her hips. She closed her eyes, lowered her chin, and shook her head. I don't think they teach you humans anything. Her head snapped up as quickly as it had dropped, and her eyes opened wide. I must sound like a total bitch, but it's not your fault. Focus on your inventory tab. Got it? I nodded. See all the slots that represent the storage. Again, I bobbed my head. Now lay your hand on the rhino roll while you focus on an empty slot. When I did, the rug faded from sight. The divider between 2 of the squares representing slots in my bag disappeared. In the wider space left behind appeared the image of the roll. The young elven woman clutched my shoulder, gave it a single shake, then jerked her chin down.
So, are we going to gut it, too?
The three of us shot glares at Elrin.
All right, I get it. Not the time for my snarky mouth.
He gave a two-fingered salute. When we were reasonably convinced he'd gotten the full extent of the message, we headed away from the beast, then wrangled the mounts who'd dispersed when the rhino charged. Elrin had to chase his because it had run off during the conflict. I examined the rock troll while we waited. Elrin had exaggerated when he said we had all leveled. Brunk remained level 14, and I suspected he didn't consider him one of us. Although Johan tended to call non-humans whatever slur suited him, Elrin seemed to like Shabana just fine. Maybe rock trolls didn't count in his estimations. By the time he returned, we were all mounted and lingering. But once we were all back together, we split off again with Elrin and Trayla headed south. Brunk and I plodded west toward the rocks. We rode in silence until we came to the loose rocks on an incline leading up to the rock faces of the Iron Mountains. I looked north, then south. "Do you see a path anywhere, Brunky?" He cocked one of those bushy eyebrows, again.
Brunky?
It didn't sound nearly as cute when delivered in his gruff tone. I waved it away. "Go that way," I pointed north. "Let me know if you find a trail." Brunk grunted. My horse's hooves crunched on the rocks at the base of the mountain as I passed around a towering boulder. I nearly fell off my mount when I spied a figure standing halfway up the incline on a narrow trail that led down to the massive stone. He marched forward like a man with a purpose. Shurton. He raised a finger, then pressed it to his lips. His voice came in a harsh whisper.
You cheated. Brought friends. I should go back and kill Shabana now. Better yet, I should murder you on your mount and take what's mine. It was never meant for your eyes anyway.
I glared at him, but decided answering wasn't in my best interest. It had been the longest day of my life, and I'd lived on a farm, so that was saying something, and the battle against the rhino had mentally drained me. The whole time there had been this little tick in the back of my brain that these people, and a rock troll, were in danger because of me. This led me to think maybe it was best if I left them out of the remainder of my task. They'd gotten me this far, and that should be enough. I don't care about the tome. I don't care about you either. All I want in this world is to have Shabana back, so let's deal. How are we doing this? Shurton folded his arms across his chest and gave the subtlest of nods.
You and I are cut from the same cloth, Tess.
He raised a hand before I could object.
I know. Believe me, I know what it's like to be a good person. Of course you wouldn't think so now. But when your own father abandons you and leaves you with nothing, your perspective changes. You see the Warsager as this mythical source of evil, this demon bastard, right?
I suppose you're going to try to tell me that he was something else entirely.
Actually, he could be a real bastard. That much is true. But he was my bastard. My master. My savior. The man who scribed my magical essence and sent another acolyte to find me.
A question occurred. And what happened to this acolyte?
It's interesting you ask. It has taken me the longest time to get an answer to that question. It wasn't until my new master came along that I did. That bitch Rashan and her crowd of conspirators, including Giles Renard, murdered him in the Plague Barrens.
He moved closer and stopped just a foot from my horse's snout. The horse grumbled in a fine display of its good instincts, in my humble opinion.
But it's not for that waste of mana I seek retribution. Warsager Jakar was like a father to me when my own relinquished the responsibility.
So because Roshan tends to the needs of the university students, you decided everybody has to pay the price of your revenge. All those people because one of the supposed murderers happens to reside there. I'm sorry, what were you saying about knowing what it's like to be a good person? He wheeled around, then moved away. It was at least a minute later before he turned his head just enough for me to hear his voice echo off the rocks.
The outpost is cut into the face of the mountain just around this curve. Let's get this done.
A pang of guilt washed over me as I scanned the horizon to the south for my human and elven companions, then passed the boulder as I climbed the trail in search of Brunk. This was for the best. Maybe I could get the deed done before they figured out where I went, and if things went wrong, they would be spared. This time, the voice bursting into my mind was my own. Are you crazy? Tell them where you are. They'd come of their own volition. They could have declined. Baba had told me about elves of lore whose devotion to the light was unrivaled. That might explain Trayla's being there. Maybe he'd come to avenge his friend's death, but it seemed more than that. Advancement? No, I didn't think so. But my lack of certainty about Elrin made me appreciate Brunk all the more. The rock troll hadn't hesitated when he heard Shabana, who he'd met but once, was in trouble. He'd hardly wanted to leave my side. And now you want to leave his when he's the highest level in your party. My doubts fled when the rapid clopping of his horse's hooves echoed off the rock faces. Then Brunk appeared on my side of the boulder. He sped past, spotted me, then reined his horse around like a seasoned rider. Shurton spun around, spotted the rock troll, then winked his eyes in succession.
A troll? Tess? Seriously? Wherever did you find this beast? Did you think bringing a higher level would help?
He laughed, the sinister sound echoing off the rocks and surrounding me. Once I'd shoved down the desire to curse him into the underworld, I drew a breath. All I want is Shabana. Hoofbeats from the south introduced the other pair, but when I looked that way, I spied a third rider's shadowy silhouette. Since the sun had vanished behind the northwestern peaks, I couldn't make out who accompanied Elrin and Trela, but long flowing robes created a wind-blown canopy in the shadow's wake. I cast inner illumination and, when I realized who it was, the chill of premonition shuddered through me. What the hell was she doing here? The horses came to a stop. Elrin's face twisted up in what I thought was an apology. I shook my head, hoping it conveyed understanding. The third dropped her hood, revealing the dyed green roots merging into the cascading black locks that fell flat and ran halfway down her back. I snarled at the woman who'd silenced me, then treated me like a wart. Yin. You don't sound happy to see me. She patted the center of her chest with one palm. I'm shattered. Then she cast a gaze toward Shurton. You missed a couple. He turned and strode up the path.
I knew they were there. I was hoping to keep this simple, but now that you've brought them, we might as well all go.
I winked my eyes in succession. Yin, human, level 45 Shade Witch, melee power rating 34, melee defense rating 26, ranged power rating 19, ranged defense rating 29, magic power rating 91, magic defense rating 72. Even without a solid understanding, any really, of how these numbers reflected one's power, these dwarfed any I'd seen before. There was no way we could stand against Master During's assistant if she chose to unleash her power upon us. I absently twisted the ring on my finger with the thumb of the same hand. When I realized I was doing it, I balled up a fist, then dropped it to my leg. The charge was spent, and soon we'd all be dead. Yin's appearance proved one thing with certainty. Shurton had never planned on returning Shabana. She couldn't reveal herself and let us live if she planned to resume her duties at the university. I was mystified about her motives in aiding the former acolyte of a vampire, but none of that mattered when I considered the ultimate outcome. She raised a hand. It flashed purple, then my interface reported I was silenced. Of course I was. Yin made a shooing gesture with the tight fingers of one hand. Move along, up you go, all of you. Brunk shot me a glare. She noticed. Don't even think about it, troll. I'll separate your bones. Shurton called back over his shoulder just before he disappeared around a boulder at the top of the trail.
It's best you believe her.
Down. Off your horses, let's go. One finger twirled. Leave your staves and spear. Drop them. We dismounted. Only once we'd formed a circle did she follow suit. Our weapons clattered to the ground. We led her up the trail, then around the boulder. As soon as we made the turn, I spied a wide, high opening cut into a rock face about 30 yards ahead. Heavy wooden beams lined the entry. When we passed the rock, I noticed the stump of a short tower set between two others, a perfect place to camouflage it from passers-by on the plains below. We walked into the darkness of a tunnel supported by walls of black, dusty bricks. The path wrapped around to the right. When we turned, I noted the end of the line of ambient light cast through the door by the moons outside. No torches lined these walls, and, if not for my illumination spell, I'd have been blind. Still, since it used ambient light, the tunnel was dim. Shurton stood ahead in the shadows. He raised one hand, gesturing to his left.
See? In one piece, as promised.
I peeked around the corner into a recess with bricks the same color as the stones in the outer passage. Chains and shackles dangled from wooden plates screwed into the walls. Shabana stood against the wall, struggling. Her restraints clanked and rattled. "Shabana!" I shot forward and no one tried to stop me. "You idiot!" she bellowed as I wrapped my arms around her. "You shouldn't have come. He'll just kill us all now." Now that I had the full layout of the situation, I tried to open party chat, knowing my face was out of view and the two cretins wouldn't see my eyes flickering across text. But my interface reported bad news. "Your party with Drossen Welling has been disbanded." I reasoned I'd missed a message after the battle with the rhino, but the reminder of party range limits drained my last ounce of hope. Uncle Drossen might as well have been on another continent. Shurton grasped the back of my robe, then yanked so violently I tumbled to the hard-packed earth of the outpost.
Enough,
he spat.
"Give me the tome."
I considered lying, telling him I hadn't really brought it because I didn't trust him. Then I cursed myself for not hiding it before I'd come. If I told the lie, they'd just kill me and retrieve it from my bag. My brain raced for a solution as I opened my inventory tab, then peered at the tome taking up a space inside. But nothing came. Once I got to my feet, I summoned the book. It appeared atop my raised palm. The sudden weight caused my arm to drop a little, and Shurton lunged forward to snatch it as if it might have otherwise fallen into a fiery pit. The lust in his eyes when he traced the tips of 2 fingers over the cover caused my nose to wrinkle with disgust. Then his chin tilted up. His expression morphed into a cross between a sneer and a smile.
"Kill them."
I wheeled, then pressed my back to the cold stone bricks. Although Yin's own expression of disgust was predictable, it wasn't directed at me, or Elrin, or the elven woman, not even the rock troll. She raised one hand. "Thank you." A swirling black void appeared in the center of her palm behind clawed fingers. Then a flurry of activity burst forth. Black wings thrashed as a flock of birds traced in lavender light zipped through the air. Shurton screamed, a high-pitched utterance that dug into my ears as it echoed down the tunnel.
"You deceitful
His words were cut off as one of the ethereal conjurations burst into his mouth. Explosions of blood splattered across his shoulders and collarbones as the birds pecked away. More and more flew forth from her hand. They scrambled and squeezed into the crowd on his body. The harsh claws and wet, frenzied pecking sounds caused a stir of nausea in my gut, a chill throughout my body. But when I noticed the shiny focus of Yin's casting glare, I found the wherewithal to slide my back along the wall. Her hand dropped as the crows engulfed the one-time acolyte. Only then did the tome tumble from his grasp. The crows faded from existence. Shurton thumped to the ground. His legs quaked a final time. Then he lay still. Yin swept up the tome. Apparently unconcerned, her back was turned to us. I waved the others away and mouthed, "Go, go, go." But not a one moved. Brunk shook his head. "Party chat. Contessa of Milbury, party. Run, all of you. Trela, party. Elves don't leave party members behind. Brunk, party.
Brunk fight Dark Woman.
Contessa of Milbury, party. She'll kill all of us with no effort. You saw what she just did. Trela, party. Then I will die a fine death." Brunk charged. Yin spun around, raised one hand without looking up from the tome, and shot a black line of energy into the center of his chest. The huge troll was lifted from the ground as if he weighed less than a feather. His back slammed into the wall, and his feet kicked desperately while Yin continued to flip through the pages. Ah, yes, look at all these runes. What a little treasure, don't you think? An inkling tickled my brain. Was Yin here to recover the tome for the Academy? Could she actually be on our side? After all, she hadn't killed Brunk, just disabled him. He'd lost no health. Then the tome closed with a hollow thunk. Yin ran a finger over Shabana's chin and down to the nape of her neck. "I so hate to see potential wasted, but you understand. It wouldn't do for the masters to know I was here." My hopes were dashed. Shabana twisted her head away when Yin's face hovered inches from her own. "My people will hunt you to the ends of Rubal. They will discover your atrocity this day." "I doubt it." She turned her gaze on Elrin, then Trela, and finally on me. Yin strolled over to Elrin. "Entitled worm, you deserve no better." She balled up one fist, then punched the center of his chest. Upon impact, glaring orange light caused me to wince. Her hand burst through his torso, then out his back. Elrin's eyes bulged, his mouth gaped. Yin flexed her bloody fingers, then withdrew the hand with a violent jerk. Elrin fell to the ground, dead. She raised the bloody hand and renewed the silencing spell on Trayla and me. Then she paced up and down the tunnel 10 feet at a time. I don't take murdering an elf lightly, but you understand I have no choice. While I don't believe Shabana's people will discover my deeds, yours are different. Master interrogators. She shrugged one shoulder. But it's too late now. I burned with hatred when I realized she was making a show of killing us. Her ego. We were outmatched and she knew it. Something scraped as I pushed off the wall. Yin's expression didn't show she'd noticed. Her gaze was devoted to the elf. I reached around to the right side of my belt and my hands brushed the object stationed there. I love you, Baba. Yin's pacing carried her closer to Trayla, so Shabana and I were out of her sight line. My shoulders hunched with each step on the tips of my toes until I drew to within 2 feet of the powerful caster. Only then did the resounding click of metal freeing my knife from its sheath come. Yin heard it, but when she turned to face me, it was too late. I plunged the blade into her flesh halfway to the hilt, twisted, then jumped back. Blood flowed from the wound, but I'd missed my mark. Although I'd aimed for her heart, the blade had entered just above her left breast. She glared down in disbelief, then back my way. You stupid girl, she gurgled. She kicked me in the chest. For the second time, I tumbled backward and onto my duff. Trayla jumped on Yin's back and threw her arms around her neck, but the more experienced caster ripped the blade from her chest and stabbed the elf's arm over and over until she relented and tumbled off. The knife clattered to the ground, then she stood over me. Blood flowed from the wound. Good. I hope you bleed out. She slapped one hand over the wound. Did you think it would be so easy, stupid girl? She thrust out a hand to her right, though her focus remained on me. A wave of dark energy impacted the nape of Shabana's neck, then she screamed as her head lolled forward. Yin casts Life Drain 3. Shabana, minus 40 HP. Minus 40 HP. I threw up one hand. No, stop! Tell me what you want! I want to watch your friend die. The health bar over her head ticked up a notch, then another. The liquid in Shabana's health meter drained to half as horror sent radiating chills throughout my arms. I opened my spells tab, scanning furiously for a solution, anything, but I knew I was too weak. The scrolls, the combat, none of it had been enough. Brunk lay unconscious. Trayla cast a healing spell on her arm, waiting for the healing over time effect to close her wounds. I spied my summoning spells. My eyebrow flicked up. Ice or fire? I threw up one hand. You are silenced. Gods damn it! Yin cackled with laughter. The wound on her chest no longer bled, but she continued to drain life from Shabana. The sheer evil of her intent burned every vessel in me. Then I remembered. I closed my eyes, searching deep in the earth for the source. Heat radiated into my legs and backside where they touched the earth. Yin stopped casting. How are you doing that when you're silenced? As I opened my eyes, I noted an orange glow radiating from my flesh. Heat surged. I threw up a hand. But Yin was too fast. Her life drain ceased as she stepped forward, then kicked again. My chin shot back. Pain erupted through my skull. The back of my head pounded the cold surface behind me. I tried to raise my head, but the world tilted. Furious blinks did nothing to clear the effect. The heat dissipated. The fight was over.